Miami, how we doing?
Fish on First Live. We are back another week, 4 games in spring training. But before that, we have some big news around the baseball world. Our beloved friend, Sixto Sanchez, he's going to Mexico. He found a new home, folks. For those that thought there was no shot he would ever throw a baseball again, he's going to be in a starting rotation on top of that. So congrats to Sixto. Carver, I know you're ecstatic about this. I know you're loving it. You can't wait to talk about this guy. I mean, how happy are you to see Sixto finally going to take a big league mound, hopefully for a full Mexican League season?
Good for him. The guy found a job. I think we've talked enough about Sixto Sanchez over the course of the past handful of years, so I'll move.
All right, enough for the bigger news.
I just want to say quickly, the Marlins, as most people are aware, they set a major league record for players used last season, 70 different guys. And I've been tracking where those guys ended up, where they all ended up. And he was one of the last stragglers after Sixto. Now there's just 5 guys from last year's team that are still unemployed as far as I know. So Sixto is one of the last ones to land somewhere. And this has become an increasingly popular route for guys in his career phase, where their future is uncertain. They hop over out of affiliated ball entirely into the Mexican League right there. So I can't say that I'll be watching, but this is a make or break year for his career, I imagine. So best of luck to him.
All righty. 4 games in, Marlins are 3-1 in grapefruit league play. A lot to get into. A lot of pitchers were used. Every one of them threw one single inning. So there's a lot of options to start with. But Krutchik, just what are your main takeaways so far? There's a lot of angles where we could go with this, and I'm sure we'll cover all of them. And there's a lot to talk about with this team. Definitely with prospect side, guys who just stood out overall, pitching. Even how these weird practices and drills have even to a certain extent worked on some certain guys. So just what are you taking away from the Marlins 3-1 start? Or 2-1. Sorry.
They're 3-1 and 1.
Yeah.
3-1 and 1. So they've got 7 points in the standings. So you got to win these games in regulation if you want those 2 points. But the biggest thing that stood out to me is pretty much every pitcher that has come out of the gates has been throwing heat. I don't know if that's a result of guys adding velocity or if it's just guys that are hitting their top velocity earlier in camp. It might be a little bit of both. Like Valente Beozo told us that he was working on the velocity over the winter and into the spring. So he was up to 92, 93. He was averaging 89 last year on his fastball to moderate success. And now he's added 2 or 3 ticks to that fastball. Robbie Snelling was throwing – his velocity dropped to the low 90s last year, and it was back up in the mid-90s coming out of the gate. Sandy was throwing what he normally throws during the regular season, except now he's throwing it, first time out in the spring. Max Meyer added a couple of ticks to his fastball and his slider. So, everyone who's coming out right now, they're throwing heat. So that's something that I'm very excited to see. Now, there is the caveat that they've only been pitching 1 inning. So I'm curious to see what happens when they go up and down, 2 innings, 3 innings, 4 innings. If Valente Beozo in particular can maintain 92, 93 when it gets to the 5th and 6th inning, which we'll see probably in about 3 weeks, that's when that's when I'll get really excited.
All right, let's start from the earliest game, or not earliest, most recent game, and we'll kind of work our way backwards a little bit since you were there, Carver. That's the most fresh game for everyone. Max Meyer made his spring debut for the Marlins. Goes 1 inning, looked pretty good. Unfortunately, no strikeouts, no walks. That's kind of just what happens. Well, let's be clear about this. No Marlins pitcher struck anyone out today. So as weird as that sounds, there's no Marlins pitcher struck someone out today in the Marlins. I want to say 4-1 win against the Mets. Yes. Carver, what stood out about Max? Now you spoke to him, and after that, you could even talk a little bit about Dax Fulton, who made his first appearance in a game since I want to say late 2023, or even early 2023.
Yeah. So what stands out about Max more than anything is confidence. I kind of wrote about that this guy just speaks like he's confident in everything that he does. And I think that he kind of backed it up a bit today, even though it's only one inning. You can only take so much away from one inning where he didn't even throw all of his pitches, no changeups. Didn't really even see all of what he has to offer, I don't think. You only saw one of each of his new pitches that he's working on, which is sweeper and sinker. Did see his staple slider, which is really good, and you saw pronounced increase in velocity. So I think that in a very limited showing, this is very good signs for Max Meyer. It's hard to say that this is the best we've seen him because it is just one inning. We have seen him on the backfields working out and doing lives and stuff, and he seems like this as well. So I would say that he is in probably close to as good as we've seen him, with, of course, much more to be known in spring training with these guys only going one inning at a time. So a good day for Max. The velo is what really stood out to me. 4 miles extra on your fastball, 2 to 3 miles extra on your slider. And then he's working on these new pitches as well. So I like it. I'm really, really encouraged to see how this guy is going to do as he gets more innings, which is what he wants. I know that it's a strategy of the organization to kind of ease these guys in and give them one inning at a time, which is okay. A lot of other teams go too, but whatever, it is what it is. We know the reasons why. We've heard them explain to us that they kind of want to ease them in and not go too hard, especially with guys that were injured previously. So this is a really good first step getting back on a mound, major league mound for Max Meyer. Hopefully he's not innings limited again. That was kind of alluded to and asked by Steven Strom today, that is he going to be innings limited? Didn't really get a straight answer. It's just kind of a wait and see, I guess, is what McCullough said. So, hopefully the reins are off and Max has a full go season and we see him at his best. I think that we could.
And then what about Dax?
For Dax, it's just, all of his teammates high-fiving him as he got back in the dugout, patting him. Just so excited to see him back on a major league mound after just a ridiculous amount of days, 600 plus days since this guy has thrown off of a major league mound. It's just amazing to see this guy back. It's not easy to go through one, let alone two Tommy John surgeries. He is smiling all over the place. I talked to him the first day at camp. He said, literally, the quote was, "I'm a kid in a candy store." I asked him to kind of recollect it today. He said, yeah, same thing, pretty much. I'm in the same mind frame. I'm just here the only way I can go is up. And I really think that as he was injured, he took proper steps to only get better in terms of his physical health and where he was with weight and size. Really just took to it, doing as much as he could with his body. And you saw it today. We saw him throw 95. Of course, only one inning, got through it pretty quickly. You did see some rust with him not getting to first base. That caused an error. So you saw a little bit of a rust, which he alluded to himself that, I thought I was just watching the game again. So he's got to still break into it. It's still the early days of this for Dax, but he's only going to get better. He's proven that, he's no matter what the circumstances, he's going to do everything that he can to get better. And that's what matters for guys like this. Really like this kid. Super, super cool to see Dax back on a major league mound. And I'm intrigued to see what these new pitches do for him. We only saw, I think, a couple of them today. He calls it like a gyro slider or something like that. I know he's working on a couple other things as well, but this guy could be very good still. He was still young when he got injured both times. Once out of high school, then he got injured again, of course, and missed another full year, and then the COVID year too. So this guy is behind schedule in terms of innings thrown. That's what he needs, his innings, and I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, definitely. So, Sean, I'll go to you. Anything that's just stood out to you overall this spring? I know, unfortunately, none of the games have been broadcasted on TV except the second one, which was thankfully the Sandy start. So just anything overall that stood out to you this spring?
Yeah, just on we've kind of hit on the things that have excited me the most so far. This is so far, before today, I think the pitchers we've seen, it's kind of what we, expected. Sandy, we know that Sandy's going to be among the leaders in innings pitched for the team. Eddie, where he's going to be among the leaders in second chances, in the rotation. And then, but Meyer, and then Quantrill tomorrow, we're getting into the area where these are the pitchers that if, they really take off and run with it, that can kind of maybe move the needle, a little bit, for the team. So Meyer had me really excited today. beyond that, just I'm kind of curious. Really, I'm curious to see how the defense settles out on this team. Yeah, they made a point of saying, Bruce and Pete, when camp started, that they're expecting this to be a more defensively sound group this year. A lot more hustle, a lot more defense. But I guess with maybe a couple of exceptions, I'm just kind of wondering where that defensive soundness is going to come from on the diamond. And that's something I'm definitely looking forward to see this spring, is who fits into what spot, and even the players that we think is locks for position, like defensively, should they be locks for those spots? So that I'm looking forward to see shake out.
Alrighty. Let's just keep going through all the games. I think yesterday was Edward who made the start. He did not look great. Davila was there. Davila definitely was there, hitting 98 a couple times. Good stuff from Edward overall.
No walks.
No, yeah, I guess, yeah. No walks in 1 inning of work.
And speaking of defense, he was bailed out by some good defense, right? The Griffin Conine.
He also got pretty hurt. He got hurt pretty much.
So that's one thing that's what makes it a little challenging covering and analyzing this stuff without the TV broadcast, and even just with the main center field broadcast, we don't get it either. A good idea of the defense. Today, Max Acosta turned a really good double play, but we don't really have a great look at it. And that Conine catch, I don't know if anybody actually has video of what it was, but it was the third out of an inning, and it saved at least 1 run in there. So that's the type of stuff that
I could tell it was a good catch.
Yeah,
I saw that graph of yours. That was great. On the Conine catch.
Yeah, actually, and one thing we can actually look at because of the center field cameras, we can see catching and receiving. So that's one thing that, so from today's game, not to change the subject already, but I didn't want to gloss over Agustin Ramirez today. 115 RBI single off the bat, miles per hour exit velo, far and away the hardest hit ball so far this spring for the Marlins. And to just put that in perspective, that's the type of number that is like about as high as any hard hit ball the Marlins had last year as a team. That is peak Jake Berger levels. That is peak Josh Bell levels. Really impressive on that end. So I'm taking a closer look at his receiving today. He's appeared in a few games. He hasn't started the game at catcher. He's come off the bench to this point. To me, even though highly doubtful that he makes the opening day roster, he's somebody that we certainly expect to see a lot of during the season, and to come up very early in the season. So I'm glad, at least offensively, that he is as advertised in this really small sample.
And one under the name that I do want to mention, and we spoke about him a little bit last week, and hit a home run today, Max Acosta. That guy is going to be good. I'm not going to stop saying it. We spoke about him last week. We said we think he could stick it short. Eli mentioned it, turned a double play today. I mean, it's a fun player to watch, and I think he's going to have the power at that position to stick. And I think that's something that more people. Oh, there you go, Mexico. So look at that comment. There we go. Attaboy. That I don't know. I just think he's good. He broke out in 2024. I'm sorry, at AA. We haven't seen him at AAA yet. I'm curious. I mean, like, this seems like a guy who could really potentially, like, if he keeps doing what he's doing on both sides, he could beat out a couple guys and maybe make it towards the end of these cuts. It's highly doubtful that he makes the opening day roster, but just the way he's gone about the spring and the way he's performing, like, I feel like this is someone who could really potentially make it. I mean, this guy could play short, second, third. You could play him anywhere. I think he may even play a little bit in outfield. So, like, he has power. I like what I've seen from Acosta. Carver, if you want to touch on him, I know you got to see the homer today. So I don't know if you guys spoke to him after, but just this guy has stood out just from the start of spring all the way up until now.
Yeah, I think a couple of the other reporters spoke to him after I had departed. I had to go for a prior obligation. But he has definitely stood out, particularly with the defense. I mean, if there were any questions on if this guy can stick at shortstop, he's answered those so far this spring. Today he made just some plays that, like, league average shortstops would even have a tough time with, and he just made him look really smooth. So I think this guy has good first reads off the bat. I think he has plus speed to get to them, even if he's late. Arm is good. I think he will definitely be a shortstop. And then, man, he shows power today, which was great. So it was later in the game, yeah, but still, it shows power. That's something that he hasn't always shown, is the power tool. So to see him show power in a hard-to-hit environment, that's amazing. So a great day for him. He's had a great spring so far. He's impressing. And I honestly don't see it out of spring training. I think the Marlins think that he needs more time in the minors. But if he keeps going like this, man, it's a conversation.
Definitely. All right, Nate, let's talk about Sandy. He made his first appearance since Tommy John. I mean, the guy hit 99 5 times. It was fun to watch, even if it was just one inning. He's starting again on Friday against the Braves. We'll see who they bring on their travel roster to play the Marlins. But overall, I mean, you kind of have to be pretty happy with what you saw from Sandy and that one inning of work, and then followed by Robbie Snelling, who, despite only being 7 pitches, hit 97. And that's definitely another guy who I think all of us are very high on here at Fish on First.
Yeah, just seeing Sandy back out on the mound for the first time since 2023 was awesome. And of course, to top it all off, he hits 99, I think his second or third pitch against the under Acuna. So that was incredible. He dominated that, top of that Mets lineup. And yeah, Robbie Snelling too. He looked great as well. And we did call out Peter Benditz about how this is the best Sandy's ever looked. And I'm not gonna agree with that, but he looks pretty damn good out there for being on the mound in almost 2 years. So very impressed with him. Very excited to see him myself when he comes over to this side of Florida. I'm excited for that on Friday. And yeah, can't really say much else about him and Robbie, but Sunday was a great day for the arms. And I want to touch on Acosta a little bit. Do you guys think there's any, how do I word this? Just any competition internally with all the guys they brought in? They brought in a lot of middle infielders, a lot of guys kind of around the same age, same kind of build. Do you think that has anything to do with, obviously not all, it's not, you can't say that's responsible for everything, but do you think that helped him a little bit, just give him some extra motivation?
I think there's definitely competition there. I mean, Sanoja could play everywhere, literally. So I think that's a guy, and he made it to the majors too. Aside from that, I just thought, I have to kind of recall in the roster a little bit, but there's guys who are going to get an opportunity, but then there's guys who are just there mainly for experience. And I think that's what they were thinking with someone like an Acosta, who's a little bit older. He's on the older side for a prospect, but I don't know, man. I'm loving what I'm seeing, and I think this guy, I don't know how much of it has to do with the competition, but maybe just a change of scenery helped him out a little bit. Really, and the Rangers seemed like they were high on him too because they protected him on their 40-man. So they obviously felt like this is a guy who someone could take in the Rule 5. So they felt pretty good about protecting that guy and eventually trading him for Jake Berger. And many people were saying Vargas was the main piece of that deal. I think it's Acosta, and it's showing right now.
Yeah.
So, all right, Krutchik, you wrote about Valente Bello, so I don't think many people expected us to talk about him, but he's pitching tomorrow. We'll see how he looks. We'll see how many innings he goes, because he would be the first guy out of this crop of starters that will be repeating an appearance in spring training. What did you see from that first game? And then you got to watch him in the opening game, but Matt Mervis hits the Marlins' first home run of the spring. He's been a guy who a lot of people have spoken about pretty highly here on, and he's a guy who could be a bounce back candidate. Most likely will make the opening day roster, play some first base, DH, splitting some time with Jonah Bride. So what stood out to you about Mr. Belloso so far, and just Mervis as well?
Yeah, with Belloso, I just love the added velocity. I love that the added velocity didn't come with a price. Sometimes when guys add velocity, they're forcing it, and they will lose control and command as a result. But he was hitting his spots. He was staying in the zone. Of course, only threw 15 pitches. So, again, we'll see how that velocity and control hold up. After a few innings, I don't think he'll throw a few innings tomorrow. If I had to guess, it would be 2 innings, 3 innings at most. But, yeah, I love that he was able to throw with extra velocity without sacrificing the command. Also, one thing that he mentioned, and Nick Fortes, who was his catcher, confirmed the same thing, was that his breaking balls are also sharper and more effective. And it's funny because, Kevin, you and I were watching Belloso's first live that he did in front of the media. And I said to you, Belloso's stuff is moving a lot, like more than I remember it moving. And turns out that's exactly what was happening. The added velocity makes the ball dance a little bit more, makes the spin rate go a little bit higher. So it's not just the fastball that's getting help from this added velocity. It's the secondary stuff as well.
Yeah, and then just like you were mentioning it, just, like that, those pitches, those secondaries moving the way that they did and the way we saw them move, it's like that's gonna play, and that did play in that one start, So like I'm impressed by Belloso. He obviously knows he needs to fight for that 5th rotation spot, because the guy that we spoke about at the top of the show that guy's probably right now leading the way and probably will get it. And unfortunately, Bayos is going to have to start in AAA. But let's talk Matt Mervis. Hit the first homer of the spring. Looked good. He's looked good so far. I think defensively, there's still some stuff to hope for. It didn't look too good defensively. But overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing from Matt Mervis. Just really wanted to touch on him really quick because that's a guy who I think could really bounce back, has an opportunity to play every day. Didn't play a lot with the Cubs, came up, and then they traded for Michael Busch, didn't make his case a lot better. They got Trey Mancini. They put a lot of guys in front of him. I think here in Miami, he's going to have the opportunity. And I know it's a tough ballpark to play in, but he has played in it before in WBC. For some reason, he likes the right field porch. He says it's good for him, which I found interesting, but hey, man, if that's what you like, go for it. But aside from that, I do want to ask you guys, and I think this is something we've really discussed a lot in the chat. And I think this is something that we don't really see is these guys all going one inning. It does not matter how many pitches you throw. You're going one inning and you're coming out. I mean, I think the most clear example is Robbie Snelling. He literally threw 7 pitches and he was done. And I guess we could open this to you guys, but I'll start with Eli. What do you think about that? Do you like it? I personally don't, because let's say, for example, a guy throws 3 pitches. Are you going to take him out after that? Like it's just like such a weird thing. And I know during spring training you could take guys out and put them back in, but like you can't just have like a guy throw 7 pitches and that's it.
In those cases, maybe they didn't do it with Snelling. You can still get value out of continuing to throw on the side. Like if they want to divide up these innings as much as possible in the game, it's not uncommon for players to continue to build up their pitch count by throwing off to the side at close to full intensity, or going back to the bullpen maybe afterwards in doing that. So I don't know if that was the case with Snelling. It's in now that they've changed the layout in Roger Dean, the bullpens aren't on the field anymore. They're behind that wall. So maybe that adds to some of the confusion there. One takeaway is that it seems like they're not all that worried about getting the guys fully built up by the start of the season. Usually every other time I've seen this progression, you had just one inning every single start from here on out. So guys are going 1, and I would expect across the board, maybe they surprised me, I would expect every single guy to go max of 2 innings for next outing and then 3. And you do the math, there's not really time for anybody to get built up beyond 5 innings if you're doing it that way. That's why historically they start at 2 and then they build up to 3, then 4, then 5, then usually get to 6 in their last outing. The standards that they're looking for in terms of length from starting pitchers, I think this is part of the idea that they're no longer all that concerned with guys going deep into games. As much as Sandy is somewhat of a unicorn in that regard, he'll be an interesting test case. You could go back to that, was the media day session, one of his media sessions where he kind of threw out there the first couple months of the season, he'd be open-minded about having shorter outings than usual, and then he wants them to let him go the rest of the way. I don't think that was totally accidental. I feel like that must have been some sort of internal communication about how they're going to do things. Just want to prepare people. Really, Sandy is the one that comes to mind most, because that is what made him so. That's what has endeared him most of all to Marlins fans and made him so exceptional. The fact that he goes the distance, complete games more often than literally anybody else in this current era, at least for the first part of the season. I don't think that's a priority. And this kind of rolls into the idea of the new pitching development guys that they've brought in, several of those that have driveline influence. It's a philosophy that puts more of a premium on effectiveness in short samples than it does on volume. I think you're going to see more of an emphasis on the Marlins getting the absolute most that they can out of pitchers in every pitch, in every inning, than actually to stretch them out and have them work a lot of innings. That's my prediction, is that Sandy may be somewhat of an exception in some cases. I think overall, though, the Marlins are going to be pretty low on the end in terms of how deep their pitchers go into games. And ultimately what they're looking for is to prevent runs, that as long as those guys are out there, they're going to try to maximize their ability by having them throw as hard as possible. And we see the velos up already, more so than worrying about stretching them out. So that's going to be fascinating to see it play out. Puts a lot of pressure on your bullpen if you're going to work that way. If your starters aren't going to go deep, then you're counting on a lot of different relievers to be effective. I feel like that is what this team has in mind. That's my early indication, is a bit of a shift towards that compared to what they may have done under Mel Stoudemire Jr. all these past handful of years.
Alrighty. I want to talk about some position battles because there's definitely some spots to be had. And I think the one that comes to mind most is the outfield. So if you guys just all want to jump in on this, but Sean, just how do you see this playing out? Griff, Conine, Stowers, Dane Myers, who saw time in right field. I think it's kind of on purpose. Just to get Stowers some reps in center. They want all their guys to play center field, even Sixto Sanchez, just to have some versatility of Derek Hill as well as one of the returners. And then you have some couple new guys. You have Albert Almora, Heriberto Hernandez, who's looked pretty good. And that's the only reason why I mentioned him. He's looked good aside from a really bad error he made in the outfield yesterday. But aside from that, I mean, it's a lot of competition. And it's about 2 spots to be had, maybe 3 in the outfield. And that includes just the bench spots on this team.
And I think center fields is really what I'm watching the most. A lot of guys, trying to prove that they can stick there, and we're not going to be scoring a lot of runs on this team, pretty clearly. So I mean, I think just for the development of everyone else, especially the pitchers. I mean, I really like hoping. I just want to see the best glove probably go there. Would be who I'd want to see win the job. Like that's like maybe that might be Derek Hill. At this point, so I was happy to see him get off to a good, hitting start. I'm, hearing the noise about Sixto Sanchez playing some center, and I was cringing for a couple hours. After that, really want him to stick over there on the corners. But I could, open to being surprised on that. Certainly, that would probably allow for a lineup with a little more thump if Sanchez was there in center. But since I don't really think that's going to work, I'm really hoping Hill takes that and runs with it. I think for that, just I think of other Marlins lineups in the past. They had that strength up the middle, defensively, and so that would probably be what I'd like to see shake out there. And then, but yeah, I think Griff is a lock, like you said. Stowers, they seem determined to get the chance to on the corners there, and Sanchez obviously is going to be out there, but. Yeah, center is where I'm the most curious to see what they come up with, and if in fact there is a set answer.
Well, that's the thing too, because I thought Dane Myers was locked in, at center field, and then I really find it hard to believe that they want to have 2 of basically the same guy. Obviously, one of them better than the other, in my opinion, with Stowers and Conine, 2 guys with high strikeout percentages. I just find that really interesting to if you decide to do that, but. Krawczyk, how do you see this playing out? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could go. There's a lot of guys with experience, quote unquote, with what the Marlins have. Derek Hill, who came up, did strike out a lot, but had his moments, showed the versatility, being able to play all 3 spots. Sanchez really the only virtual lock on this team. Outside of that, it kind of feels like a competition. And Dane Myers, I think you could pencil him in at center.
Yeah, this is it's a hard one. I tried the exercise a few days ago. I'm forgetting who it even was that tweeted this, so forgive me. But someone tweeted out you start 3, bench 2, and then cut 2. And I have no idea what I would do outside of Sixto Sanchez and Dane Myers. I think those are the 2 locks. I think Derek Hill is a major leaguer, but you're also kind of splitting hairs if you're asking yourself who's better between Hill, Conine, and Stowers. I mean, Stowers has strikeout issues, but so does Griffin Conine. I guess you can go by defense, and I think Griffin Conine is better on defense than Kyle Stowers, although I don't think Stowers plays bad defense. I really don't know. And imagine, it sucks for Victor Mesa Jr. because I also thought that he could have made this team. I think he's major league ready, but imagine if he was still healthy and now you got to add him to this equation. I really have no idea. Like you can't fall in love or out of love with anyone in spring training, but based on how crowded it is and how tight the margins are between the best player and the worst player in that outfield, you might have to rely on what you see in spring training to make the decision for the 4 guys you're going to roll in with. This is also kind of where you miss, this is going to be very random, you kind of miss having the John Birdie type of guy because he was the kind of guy that could play in the outfield but also the infield, so you can just kind of carry him as kind of your 4th outfielder or whatever. all of these guys can like only play the outfield. So it's not even like you can, just say we're going to run with 4 infielders and then we'll have 2 outfielders. One of those outfielders can play the infielder. Like, no, these guys have to play in the outfield and there's just not enough space.
I love what you said about spring training, how you really can't fall in and out of love with the guy. But with Griffin and Stowers, I mean, that's kind of what you're going to have to do because, like you said, they do the same exact thing. They're pretty much the exact same player. They both strike out a lot and both hit for a lot of power from the left side. But I think we're going to have a better grasp for the next couple of weeks or so. But I'm with Kevin. I think you can probably lock up Dane and Jesus Sanchez is probably the only true lock on this roster. And then if you're going to Derek Hill, I do agree that he is a big league guy we saw last year, but he might have to get the boot at this point because I really don't know what you do with Stowers if he doesn't make it. So I think left field will work itself out, but it's going to be fascinating just because, like I said, they pretty much do the same exact thing. So, and they're both streaky. So honestly, whoever gets hot at the right time, you might see out there on opening day. That's just how spring is.
Let's be clear. Derek Hill is a major leaguer, but he's a 4th outfielder. Like, this is a guy who's bounced around like 5 teams already. Like, respect to him. He's still being picked up at this point, and he's on the Marlins, but he's a 4th outfielder that will have some power and could play all 3 spots. I think that's the best way to put it. And he's a good dude. I mean, we spoke to him the other day. Great guy. He's not thinking about the competition. He's just trying to make the roster. He's trying to do his thing, but I think this is a guy who also struck out 35% of the time at the major league level in his Marlins stint. And this is a guy who really struggled offensively. He had a couple good moments. He had the grand slam in his first game with the Marlins, and he made a great catch in Citi Field on that Mets game. But outside of that, it's a lot of struggles. And there's a reason why he's still bouncing around. He bounced around like 3 teams in one season. He was on the Rangers, he was on the Giants, and now he's on the Marlins. And I respect it. But I don't think he's a starting outfielder. I think it would be, in my opinion, a mistake if he's the starting outfielder March 27th. I think Conan has earned that spot. He showed a lot at the major league level. Defensively, he's looked great. He has a hell of an arm. I think that's the guy you go with. But Stowers is the power. And then, unfortunately, as we mentioned, VMJ, the injury really hurt him because I think that's a guy who really could have had a shot had he had a strong spring. And then you have a couple other guys like Albert Almora, really good defensive center fielder, but are you really going to carry him throughout the whole season, knowing that this guy hasn't played in Major League Baseball since 2022? So there's a lot of ways to go with it. But Carver, let's talk about the prospects. I mean, they've really come in and showed out. You have Joe Mack, who has a hit in every single at bat he's at, I believe. Then you have other dudes like Mark Coley hit a home run today, for example. I know those guys are just filling in for the roster, but and we even look back at the first spring training game, all 7 runs were driven in by minor leaguers. So this is your time to talk about your guys. I mean, who stood out to you? And you can even talk about the backfields too, if you've been able to go back there since full squad started.
Yeah, no, I mean that game where they were down by like 6 runs and then all the prospects come in and they just kind of clean it up. That was awesome. Yeah, it's spring training, but like you said, that's when these guys want to show that they can fight. And I think in that game they definitely did. So that was awesome. I've liked what I've seen from Troy. Somehow he is still a prospect. Yes, we're still talking about Troy Johnston, the prospect, who has 3 walks, is 2 for 3, and aside from an error that went under his glove in St. Lucie late in the game, it didn't wind up hurting the Marlins, but he's been really good in right field, which he has not played for a while. So this guy just needs a chance. He just needs a chance, and I think that his bat-to-ball skills will carry him wherever whatever team he's on is going to put him, whether it's the Marlins or somewhere else. So the guy just needs a chance. I hope that, him getting time back in the outfield at right field, I hope that this will either allow the Marlins to finally give him his debut or attract another team that thought he couldn't play the outfield anymore, I guess, is my main sentiment about him, because he was exposed twice to all of the other teams and was not taken. And, there's reasons for that. So, I mean, defensive flexibility is probably the main one. So I hope that him getting time in right field is at least kind of trying to open the door for him, right? Whether it's with the Marlins or somewhere else. He is a pure hitter. And I really do think that he will hit at the major league level if he is given the chance. It's just, what is he going to do defensively? So I'm glad he's being given time in the outfield. I really am. He's been in right field, I think, every game that he's played. So I hope that this will open doors for him, whether it's with the Marlins or somewhere else. Other guys that we can call out, I've really liked Josh Ackness. That guy I think is good. I think that we will see that arm sometime this year at the major league level. It's good velo. It's good breaking stuff. It's kind of a weird arm angle, and it's all smooth. I think that he is good. I think that that's a pitcher that we will see pitch for the Marlins sometime this season. If he is given that chance, probably starts at AA, but I think that that's an arm that is usable very quickly. Geez, who else can we go to? I mean, you called her Hernandez. You called her Hernandez already. Yeah, Joe Mack. You already called him out. I was trying to go to guys that you didn't call out. But yeah, Joe Mack looks really good. Dylan Head is just impressive. I mean, physically, I think he did a lot of work physically while he was hurt, kind of like Dax, which we talked about before. When you're hurt, that's a good way to spend your time, and I think that he did it. So I think that Dylan Head is a guy to look out for. We talked about Kaba. I mean, you talked to him the other day. I think that guy is a guy to watch out for. There's so much to watch out for on this minor league side of things, more so than I think any other year in recent memory. So it's a fun time back there on the backfields. I didn't get back there today. I was kind of enamored with the pitching stuff today with Max and Dax, but there's a lot to see out there, and I'm glad that these guys were kind of getting a chance to show it as non-roster guys in actual games. Coley did it today. You see it happening a little bit. So I do think that they're going to push last year's draft guys a lot. Versus they didn't really have FCL last year after they were drafted. They either had to go to Jupiter or not play, and a lot of them didn't play. So they're pushing a lot of the draft guys from last year pretty hard. So I think that you'll see a lot of those guys continue to play in spring training games. Maybe we'll see more Orlando. That'll be interesting. But I think that you'll continue to see a lot of these draft names start to contribute late in games on the spring training side. So that'll be fun to watch. Stay the whole game because you're going to see some interesting stuff.
Man, we have the spring breakout game in a couple weeks too, and next week we'll find out those rosters. So that should be fun. Do we have a break, Eli? I just realized we're 36 minutes in and we still don't have a break. My bad.
Yeah, we can keep flowing on this. No reason to stop the momentum right here. But yeah, I think Troy was in the spring breakout game last year. Probably not this year. I think they might err on the side of younger guys for this year's edition. But yeah.
Well, remember last year's spring training was a rough one with Marlins prospects before all the other trades. But Nate, you're working on I believe the roster projection for us. Our next one. Just what are you looking at aside from the outfield competition? I know the bullpen's definitely something to look at. A lot of arms coming out of there. One that stood out to me so far has been Anthony Veneziano. The velo's up. He looks good. He's already made 2 appearances. So that's just one name that stood out. I'm glad Carver mentioned Josh Eckness. That guy, he's good. He's really good. It's a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. That's not easy to hit, and that's something that the Marlins haven't had in their bullpen for a very long time. And then there's other names, obviously, that stand out. But what are you looking at outside of the outfield on these position battles?
Yeah, I'll just go off you with the bullpen. I do like how you mentioned Veneziano. He's looked lights out, and him and probably towards the back half of that bullpen with a Jesus Sunoco, with a Calvin Fauché. So I think you can get someone really good for those guys around the deadline or even earlier if that's what Peter Bendis wants to do. But I'm looking at the infield a lot, man, to be honest with you. I brought it up on last stream. Wherever Connor Norby's going to play, either it's second or third. And then what you can do with Otto, throw him at short, maybe throw Xavier Edwards at second. But it's going to be an interesting group for sure. And, of course, you have the little battle over there at first base between Jonah Bride and Matt Mervis, which right now looks like it's going to be Mervis. He's, like we've all touched on, just an incredible spring. So when it comes to the infield, Otto, I think, is going to stick at second, and then we're going to roll with Norby at third, who's right here. And have we heard much about Norby at third base so far this spring?
No, he hasn't really had any challenging plays per se. But I will say, from what I've seen, just like infield drills, like I saw some yesterday. It's just like, man, the arm isn't there, man. Like he just can't reach first base. They're not good throws, but sometimes they are good throws. It's really on and off. And just really quickly before I mention Xavier Edwards, I think his arm is there. I think the arm for Mr. Xavier Edwards is certainly there. It's improved. I think this is a guy who now just needs to have balls hit at him, baseballs hit at him. Let me hit the pause there real quick. But yes, I think that arm is certainly improved for Xavier Edwards. With Norby, I think it's still a work in progress in my opinion, but I hope you can prove me wrong these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that changes a lot then, because I think even personally, you can throw Otto at third if it's not working out for Norby. Because I mean, we saw last year Otto can do pretty much everything you need him to do defensively. So maybe throw out to the third, and then if Norby's getting uncomfortable, move him back to second. And catcher, just looking at Fortes and Hicks. But like Kevin brought up last time, if Addison Ramirez continues to look serviceable defensively and hit 115-mile-an-hour line drives, you never know there. It's obviously unlikely, but you never know. So I'm very excited for this year's infield. I think between Mervis and Otto on that right side, it's going to be fun. And yeah, I'll hide the suspense for Monday, but that's what I'm looking at right now.
I would say one more thing, and I know this may be like not a surprise for him to make the roster at all, because either he has to or he has to go back to his former team. But Liam Hicks has shown a lot of good signs. Yeah. I will say that. I think Liam Hicks has been really good so far this spring training. He's been Sandy's guy. He's caught much of what he did today. Matt caught his side live that they call it. But other than that, I think Liam Hicks has looked really good handling this staff. He caught Dax today on one of Dax's last pitches. He threw that 95-mile-per-hour fastball. Hicks is the one that challenged that pitch, and it barely caught the corner. So I think that this guy receives really well above anything else. I think he's a great receiver, which with young players on your staff, you need good receiving catchers. Augustin Ramirez right now is not a good receiver. I don't think he showed a little bit today that he could be in the future, but I don't think he really has it yet. Nick Fortes, I think it's just average, I think, at receiving, I would say, in my opinion. I think Liam Hicks right now today may be their best receiver at the catcher position, because I think he's been really good at doing that. So he's stolen strikes. He's challenged balls that become strikes. And that is really important for a young pitching staff. So I really do like the look of Liam Hicks, especially receiving. Arm-wise, I think there's a little bit to be desired, but hopefully he can clean it up. But this is a guy that will make the baseball team for sure as the backup catcher. And that's not a bad thing. I think that he does enough offensively, and what he does receiving wise makes him stand out.
He also comes in and could possibly immediately be the best hitter in the catching group. He obviously he hasn't hit at AAA yet. He's only his highest level was AA. So I might.
It's a low bar. It's a low bar, but yeah.
It's a low bar, and he's only been at AA. That's the ceiling for him so far. It's the highest level he's been at. So maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself, but when he was there in AA, he hit pretty well. And even during these batting drills, you can't take too much away from these batting drills, but I will say that he's the one, when I watch, that is the best out of that group that is hitting. So we'll see how it translates to the game. You take it with a grain of salt, but just with the limited information that we have right now, with the limited amount of at-bats these guys have taken, I really think that he clears that low bar of being the best offensive catcher on this team.
And it needs to be noted, like, this guy's catching Sandy. It's not like, and I know Clayton was mentioning it's, they're just trying to pair up guys and all that stuff. And they're not trying to pair them, just trying to get equal playing time. But like, unfortunately, I just don't see it like that. Like, they're specifically putting Hicks with Sandy. Like, we saw the first start, we saw the last couple lives. I know Joe Mack caught him today. I think you told us, Carver, but I think that's just because Hicks was actually going to play today, and he did. And Friday, Sandy's making a start against the Braves on Friday. I'm almost certain Liam Hicks will be catching Sandy, because tomorrow it'll be Fortes catching Cal Quantrill in his first start as a Marlin. And we should probably touch on that a little bit. Quantrill making a Marlins spring training debut tomorrow, probably going 1 inning. I think it's taken a lot longer than I personally thought, because he did arrive on pitchers and catchers day or the day after. So it wasn't like he showed up when Tim Anderson showed up last season, for example. Like, he got there pretty quickly. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. Eli, this is a guy who the Marlins are really going to need to eat up some innings more than anything. He could have a 4 ERA, and he could be going 6 innings a night and finish with 150, 160 innings, on the season. And who knows? Maybe this is a guy who they could flip at the deadline. It's a very cheap contract at the end of the day.
Yeah, but before getting ahead of ourselves on that, let's see him pitch one time. So that is why I'm eager to see this very first one. And I'll be curious to see whether he's the last one for the single inning start, or whether he's the first one for the 2 inning start, because he hasn't previously pitched in a game yet, as we've noted, but he has, as you also noted, been in camp the entire time as well. So I wonder how exactly they're going to handle that. The way he's lined up would be like tentatively in the number 5 spot of the rotation because Sandy pitches the next day and it turns over again. Not to make anything of that. Again, it's just because it was arrived a little bit later than the other pitchers right there. But if you want to get a general idea about how they might actually line up those guys the first time through the rotation to start the season, he's tentatively in that number 5 spot right there. Again, we talked about him, I think, on a previous stream when he was still new to the organization. Just somebody that last year, for a lot of the year, he was on a very decent trajectory, especially when you adjust for Coors Field. He just finished on a very sour note towards the end of the year, had a small injury absence in between right there. He's somebody that relies on pitchability. He's somebody that usually has very good control, and that's what was uncharacteristic about his slump late last season, is he really struggled to throw strikes. He may have tied for the National League lead in walks last year, which is really just out of character for him. So that's the main thing that they're counting on. The main thing that if you want to look far ahead to him being a potential trade deadline chip, the most important thing is him throwing enough strikes in order to get deep enough into games, to be efficient enough with his pitches in order to get deep. So that is the main thing to watch. He is the theme that we've noted is how guys are throwing a lot harder than we expected coming into camp and being really encouraged by that. But I think he's an exception. I don't think Cal Quantrill is going to be lighting up the radar gun tomorrow. That's my prediction, is that we might be a little underwhelmed by what the velo numbers say. He's somebody that is the furthest concern from his mind ordinarily. But if he does show up and average 96 in his inning or two that he pitches, I think that'll be just more evidence about they might have something really good cooking when it comes to this new player development approach, if even he is benefiting from it at this stage of his career.
Alrighty, Sean, what are you looking for to see with Cal? He's a guy who, as Eli mentioned, struggled second half at Colorado, but got off to a pretty good start before that with the Rockies. But unfortunately, I think it was non-tendered and ended up signing with the Marlins. Took him a while to sign, but finds a spot where he's the vet. He's the vet of the group. He's one of, I think, 3 players that are 30 years old, which is crazy to think, but that's where we are with the Marlins right now. What are you looking to see from Mr. Cal Quantrill?
Yeah, I mean, that age is a bit of a wrinkle. We know Bruce loves the under 30 player as the outline, but you pretty much said it. And I've long been banging the table, and I know many of us here have as well, for the Marlins to make this kind of signing, to sign the kind of veteran player on a cheap, reasonable deal in the hopes to flip them, to spend a little bit of money to buy the prospect. As you say, if it does work out. So I'm looking for him to demonstrate that he could be capable of that. Certainly, I mean, you could see him slotting in anywhere from 2 to 5, in the rotation ultimately, in terms of how he's going to be looked to as that guy to go deep enough into games. We mentioned earlier that maybe that's not as much of a concern as it was, the last couple of years, but yeah, to see that he's back and effective. It's a little concerning that the Rockies, who aren't pitching rich, decided that he was expendable. They had the ability to bring him back. So on the other side, any, hiccups in his game last year, we could probably also explain away a little bit by the fact that he pitched in Coors Field a lot. That's not good for any pitcher. So, hopefully he could, show good form and be a worthwhile trade chip.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about something that every Marlins fan wasn't too happy to hear about. I think this was yesterday. Jess Blaylock.
The day before on Monday.
2 days ago. Yeah. Removed from the broadcasting team here for FanDuel Sports Network. And I think it needs to be clarified that this was not the Marlins removing her. This was FanDuel Sports Network, which is separate. It's a company that, obviously they do Heat, Panthers, Rays, all these other teams in Florida. They removed her, and she will be sticking with the Panthers, but the Panthers are no longer with FanDuel. They're now with the new, broadcasting company, Scripps, I think is what they're called. So let's start with Sean. What are your thoughts on this? I know you were a big fan. I think we all were a big fan of Jess. Very nice lady. We wish her nothing but the best. She was great with all of us. I think we could all attest to that. Carver, Krutchik, myself, even Eli, Nate. So just talk a little bit about her, the Marlins letting her go. Obviously, unpopular decision, but I think it was kind of the writing was on the wall to a certain extent, I think, at some point.
Yeah, I mean, and I was actually going to ask you guys, so you clarified it with that this being a FanDuel, formerly Bally's, Scripps, whatever decision. Because, certainly I think I was, all set to fire away, and I know many did on social media about the fact that, okay, another long, sad move in a history of cheap Marlins moves, Lucy with the football, made so many good positives on that front, and then just when you think you're safe, something like this happens. Jess Blaylock, huge part of the broadcast for about a decade now, I think. Can't really remember, almost can't remember her not being, on the game. But so this, I think I imagine we're going to just see a lot of decisions like this in all baseball markets. Certainly we're focused on the Marlins, but just with, sports media broadcasting issues, just seems like that pool is kind of shrinking. The way the game's, disseminated is changing a bit. So it's unfortunate. You hate to see it happen. Fortunately for her, she'll get to spend a lot more time watching defending Stanley Cup champion hockey, I guess, than, fifth place in the National League East, baseball, but we'll certainly miss seeing her on the broadcast. She brought a lot to it, and it's just unfortunate. But thankfully, if it's, as you said, if it's not the Marlins' choice to do it, then at least that's somewhat comforting.
Yeah, it surprised me in hindsight to look back and see it really was a full decade that she was on the broadcast team. And to be clear, she wasn't working. I think this past season probably did fewer games than any other, just partly because the Panthers went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, and she had obligations to cover them as well. By my count, I counted like 76 games she may have done in-game reporting for the Marlins this past year. So it was split pretty evenly down the middle between her, Kelly Sacco. They had Craig Minervini fill in for a handful of games. They had a few games, I think, even without traditional reporter in there. So I'm bummed about it. I just thought she was really great at it. The rapport she had with players, I think she did an excellent job of venturing into the off the field stories, the kind of stories that can be really cringy if they're done wrong and if they're done being too complimentary. And I think the way that she delivered that information made it a lot more compelling. That it's just talent to be, I thought, really relatable on screen and just really in your own skin when you're presenting on camera. And as somebody that watches a lot of different regional networks and different broadcasters, other people in her role, it's not easy to find somebody that does it like her. And every indication is that they're going to stay in-house to replace her, that Kelly Sacco is still going to do probably more games than she did last year. I imagine Craig Minervini is going to do more in that capacity than he did last year. There was a report from Barry Jackson that potentially Jeremy Taché might do some of those. Ordinarily, he's been contributing in other ways to their coverage previously. So they'll it won't be a new face coming in necessarily to kind of fill the void. I'll just echo what Sean brought up, is that for her sake, maybe not such a bad thing that she gets to cover a team that's actually consistently in contention versus really having to grasp for straws to come up with those compelling stories on a team that for a lot of the year will probably be firmly out of playoff contention. That's a really tough part of the job. So you got to give credit to who's ever in that role for trying to find the angles that are fresh and original and still kind of interesting.
I guess staying on that side, I don't think we mentioned this, but Craig Mish now he's also on there. So just your guys' general thoughts. The Craig Mish bombs may be over. I'm not sure, but we do know that the Austin columns at the Herald are now officially over, as Barry did mention. But whoever wants to talk about that, I think it's a cool ad. It gives a different perspective to, about the Marlins. Craig's someone who knows the ins and outs of this organization better than anyone. I don't know how much now. Well, I think he obviously knows, but just how much now he still knows with so much turnover in the organization. I think everyone's now just trying to learn more about the Marlins, just what they're trying to do, obviously. But yeah, so just what are your guys' thoughts on Craig taking over?
I think Crutcher tweeted it out a couple of weeks ago or last week. He said that the Marlins really knocked, the broadcast team out of the park. And aside from them removing Jess, I do wholeheartedly agree. I think Craig's going to be great. Obviously, he knows more about the Marlins than probably anyone else in the world, to be honest with you. So him just being on the broadcast and sharing his stories and sharing what he knows, I'd say a wider audience is going to be great. And I'm very interested to see how he clicks on the pre- and post-game shows. So I think that they did knock that one out of the park. And I will say on Jess, if you really think about it, she was here for Jose. She was here for the 2018, 2019 Marlins. She was here for the COVID team. She was here for the 2023 run. And she was here through seeing it get all blown up again. So she's an awesome person. She's going to continue to do great things. And like she said in her tweet, hopefully it is just to see you later, not a goodbye forever.
Yeah. So the interesting thing first, I think we all should be grateful to Mish for many years, the way that he was a true analyst of the people and the way that he interacted with people on Twitter for so many years, from appearing even before he was like appearing on our spaces and actually having somewhat of a personal relationship to us. He was somebody that just answered a lot of questions that nobody else would answer, and was kept people compelled with like all the little news and rumor bits that were out there before he was part of the team. There is somewhat of a comp to this. Watching a lot of Yankees games for many years now, they've had Jack Curry, who is a longtime journalist. He's a mainstay in their studio coverage pregame and postgame. I don't know how many other MLB teams have somebody like this in that insider role that is consistently on pregame and postgame. I think most of them don't, but the Yankees certainly have that template that I'm familiar with in terms of how it works, where he'll still be in a position to break a lot of news, I imagine, from being part of the team. On the other hand, he's now employed by the team's TV partner. They are working together in some respect. So I think that inevitably is going to change somewhat the tone of the stories and some of the stories that he's comfortable sharing. I think it may have to have some topics may be off limits for him in terms of things that might reflect really badly on the organization. Maybe things are going so smoothly under the Peter Bendix era in year 2 that there aren't any things that put the team in a bad light.
Hopefully.
That is a consideration to take into account if he's going to have that position, that the team itself, that is something that they have some input on, that they don't want anybody going on TV if they're going to be too mean to them. But I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. And all the years that he's put into covering the team across the various iterations of the front office, he's certainly qualified to do it. So it's going to be fun because he's comfortable in front of a camera. For people that don't know, he almost every single day on Sports Grid, he hosts his own show. He sometimes appears as an analyst on there. So he's comfortable with that platform. And I do think it is a step forward in terms of giving yet another perspective on that team throughout the year.
Yeah, getting the platform is earned. I mean, he's put a lot of time and effort into this organization. I mean, there's a reason why he has the information that he does. It's because he's trusted with it, and he's been around for a long time. So I think he will bring a different perspective on the team versus other analysts that they have. I think he brings a very honest perspective. I think he'll bring a very honest viewpoint. I don't think he's going to sugarcoat things personally. I think he's going to tell you what it is for what it is. So I'm excited to see how he kind of corroborates and coexists with other analysts that are in this space. But I think that he's been a friend of mine for a while. I think that I don't think he's going to change. I think he's going to be an honest guy. I think he's going to tell you how things are for the way that they are. So yeah, I think that he is a good addition here in a time where Marlins fans are kind of, in need of some honesty. I think that he will provide the honesty that they need. So I think that he will be a good addition here, a brave addition by the Marlins, but I think a good addition to the space that he will occupy.
Yeah, definitely. And Craig is someone who supported our work. Eli kind of mentioned it, always in our spaces. He's always cool to talk on there. And he's someone who I mean, there's no other way to say it. He's someone who, when we say at the ballpark, always talks to us, chats it up with us. He's a good dude. We're very happy for Craig to get this job. And I'm sure we'll see him a lot more at the ballpark now with this new gig. But aside from that, anything else before we hopefully.
Exactly what TJ said. Hopefully him being there puts the pressure on the organization to have the ice cream machine working 24/7.
Exactly. That's a big thing. But alrighty, anything else before we wrap it up, guys? Or I think we're good to go.
That is about it. We'll be doing these the next few weeks at this time on Wednesdays throughout spring training. We'll continue doing this before branching into the regular season schedule. So hope you guys keep tuning in for the latest analysis and insight.
Alrighty. So from Nate, Eli, Alex Carver, Sean Miller, and Alex Krutchik, We'll see you guys all next week. Peace out and go fish.
Have a wonderful evening.
Let's